thank you very much indeed for that. And I will go to the lobby and
hmm
I will ask people to mute because that's always the problem with background noise. So let's admit all.
I'll mute myself for now.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Good morning, Gemma. Good morning, Henry. Good morning, Ivana. Good morning, James. Good morning,
Morning.
Jan. Morning, John. Morning, Julie. Morning, Phil. Morning, Simon. Congratulations, Simon, on your news. Good morning, Victoria. Good morning, Carey. Good morning, Stuart. If you've just joined in the usual coffee morning fashion, if you could go on mute, that would be good. Henry, thank you. That would be great. Thank you very much. And we've got a few more people in the lobby, which we'll start bringing in. So it's Stella. Good morning, Stella. Good morning, Paul. And good morning, Johnny. And more people joining. If you've just joined, if you could go on mute, that would be great. That would be excellent. Good morning, Stuart. Good morning, David. Good morning, Kim. If you've just joined, if you could go on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Kim, for doing that. So we just admit a few further people. And good morning, Paul. Good morning, Julianne. Good morning, Graham. So people are still joining, which is great. So we'll leave it another minute, if we may, Lesley, if that's all right. So just to see if a few people join. Here we go, another couple. So we'll give it till 10:33, Lesley, if that's all right with you, and then we can start. For everybody's benefit, good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Goddard, CEO of Pension Playpen, and welcome to this week's coffee morning. We have the wonderful Lesley Carline from KGC presenting, and Lesley has crashed the car this morning, so she's not in a very good mood. But you didn't hear it from me. Sorry, Lesley, set you up like a kipper there. As usual, it's a very informal discussion, a presentation on administration and the future of pension administration, which is actually quite close to my heart. And if you would like to ask questions in the usual fashion, please raise a hand. Or indeed, if there are any important links or any comments you'd like to make, put them in the chat. We are recording, so if we can have a thumbs up from people to say we're recording, that'd be great. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Henry. We are now recording, and we are going to be running some polls today as well, which I think Lesley would like to offer some polls to the audience. Hopefully the technology will work, but we've got the wonderful Andre in the background just to help me if I can't do it properly. So, but the polls are in there as well. So let me just enter a few more people. It's now 10:33, Lesley, so I'll mute and say over to you if I may.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve said, I'm Lesley Carline, less of the wonderful, but I'm a director of KGC Associates. I have been in pensions for 30 years, working for third-party administrators, EBCs, investment houses, and pension software providers. I've been at KGC for 10 and a bit years now, and have had some industry roles. Although I've stepped back a little bit from that, I'm a mentor for the PMI and for Next Gen because it's something I really believe in. And I'm also PASA's chair of DC Governance Committee. So Steve very kindly said I could talk about what I wanted to talk about. So I thought, look at the audience of Playpen. There's very varied audience, lots of different skill sets, lots of different areas covered in this wonderful group. And I'm hoping that you will bear with me while I talk about this little particular important corner of pensions administration and what's happening and where we're going with it.
I think you're on mute, Lesley, actually. So
How did that happen?
don't know. There we go.
Right, there you go. More importantly, you can hear me again, although you might not want to. 2023 is the year of the administrator, and there is so much going on in pensions that it affects administration. Now, when I talk about administration to people, even administrators start yawning. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit more interesting, hence having some polls in and making you think. But also trying at the same time to get people to understand how administration has changed through to a number of different demands on it, how technology has changed administration, but also the changing expectations and behaviours of customers, savers, members, whatever your part of the industry wants to call them. And I think before you sort of look at how things change, you need to look a little bit at the past. I mean, so what was the role of the administrator in the past? And this does make it sound very boring. They kept member records. Now, member records were things like date join scheme, date join company, dependents, marital status. They kept some documentation. There was, and normally in filing cabinets. And occasionally they would do calculations on leaving, retirement, death, transfers. And how they dealt with members, well, members actually wrote to them. They had things like letters, and you might even actually phone in with a query. And the sort of engagement with members in the past was very much when you joined the scheme, an annual benefit statement, and when you left the scheme, whether again that was retirement, transfers, or unfortunately death. Now, what has happened back in, well, I'm thinking of the tools that we used to use back in the day. And Steve, this will interest you. My first job in pensions was at HS Admin as a sales and marketing executive back in 1992. And the unique selling point that we felt we had at HS Admin was that every administrator had a PC. And we back in the day used to see a lot of manual calculations, more than we see now, and they were done using a performer. It was signed off by a senior administrator before it was allowed to go out in snail mail. When it came to DC, I mean, it was really exciting stuff in the day. I remember Steve Connor, who was the IT director, came up with a spreadsheet that was sent out to clients who could update the contribution schedule for that month and send it in. So it meant the spreadsheet could be uploaded to Profan Classic they were using, instead of the administrators having to put it in manually. And the investment cycle was monthly. You used to send faxes because that was a move on, because some investment managers would only accept a wet signature, and it had to go through snail mail. It was monthly dealing, so if you missed that dealing day, you were basically buggered for another month. So you had to make sure everything was done and dusted. And the thing about Classic back in the day, in the 90s, obviously it's changed now, you could only have one fund manager and 3 funds recorded on the platform. And then a few years later, I joined Links Hayward, which is now Hayward Technologies. And I imagine my excitement when the system there, Hayward system, could hold 3 fund managers and up to 10 funds. I mean, God, that was so exciting. And Hayward's at the late 90s produced its first web site. And would you believe it? It actually was for DB rather than DC. And it provided payslip information and people being able to update addresses. But the DC aspects of that came later. So in my lifetime, we've seen an awful lot of change. We now have people moving from manual to technology, from mainframes to RS6000s to PCs to laptops, and we have administrators sitting at home working on Flexi, obviously with a cat, because you can't go to a meeting without a cat being involved, and everybody sort of being much more flexible. So I'm having to say so because then I have to find the button to click. Let's look at the role of administration now. Administration does still have the traditional member record keeping aspects of it, but it is so much more now. You have to be communications experts as well. We have much more engagement with members. I mean, someone's got to explain DC to the members. And because there's so much change, we now have to have a plethora of project managers, we have to have business analysts, we have to have systems experts. So we have these much more of these additional resources. And administration, please remember this, is a low margin business. So we have to be much more commercial as administrators. Someone has to pay for these projects and this additional work. So we have to think about how we get much more income for administrators through carrying out these projects. I think it has to be remembered, and people forget this sometimes, that administration is a business, it's not a charity. I think also administrators have to have much more nous about them. There has to be sort of a degree of, I mean, the importance of legal knowledge, these sort of compliance aspects, and also the deep, dark pensions techie geek. And I see that Richard Smith has joined, and I've always thought of him as a deep, dark pensions geek. But administrators have to realise when they're working through a case that it actually does have to go to a legal expert. They can no longer make the decision themselves. And they also, because we now have dual regulators and we have sort of trust-based, but we also have administration of things that come under FCA, what needs to go through compliance before it can be signed off. And one of the reasons that we really need these pensions deep dark techie geeks, and I'm told by my stepdaughter that it's okay to be a geek. It's bad to be a nerd, but you can actually be a geek. And one of the reasons that we need pensions geeks more than ever, not only is because things are changing, but we are actually losing quite a bit of DB expertise. I mean, let's face it, DB schemes are mature, and the people that have been brought up and administered them are mature as well. And they're also able, because they have nice DB pensions, to retire. So we are losing DB expertise out of the marketplace. I think we have to look at factors that are changing the role of the administrator. I mean, legislation, it's a no-brainer. When legislation changes, administration has to change with it. I mean, just think of the recent development of stronger nudging and getting people to have appointments with pensions wise. Administrators' processes and procedures had to change to accommodate those. Also, because of the increasing compliance, administrators have to provide more information. Just think of the chair's statement, just think of value for money. The things that are being put in there have to be evidenced, and that evidence comes from administrators' MI. Rise of DC. Obviously, administration had to change, the systems had to change, the technology had to change, but DC also changed the way in which we engage with members. The education piece, the explanation piece has changed it. Technology, I mean, that's a no-brainer again. Technology has changed administration. And one of the things that we've seen is the development of call centers, being able to separate out the roles of the care and maintenance, changing addresses with non-pensions technical people and people who are more going through the Institute of Customer Care qualifications. Also, I think that we have to remember when we use technology within pensions, we have to innovate it, because if you don't innovate it, you just get technology doing the same old. That doesn't really add too much. Moving on, product innovation. I think there is, particularly in the DC space, so much competition still, especially as the market consolidates. There's competition for savers and members, and this competition leads naturally to innovation, also because they're getting scale. So through the innovation we've seen, for example, if you look at Legal and General, a number of other master trusts adding on to Mello and the voting rights. We've seen Nest adding on a savings vehicle. So are we seeing pensions administration role move outside of typical member record keeping? I think we are. Customer behaviour, I'm going to touch on after technology, but moving on to market consolidation, I think there's several things that market consolidation has led to. Obviously, competition, but what it has led to is also people leaving organizations because A has taken over B. They used to work for A, they didn't like it, they didn't like the culture, so they're moving on. It's also seeing people, clients move around as well. The proposed merger of Aon and WTW unsettled quite a few of their clients, and they looked at the market. So these things happen, and when people start moving their business, it draws on resources from project management, because they need to manage the client out. It also draws away resources from business as usual, because their expertise is needed to make sure the data's right. They have to answer questionnaires and things like that. And this leads on nicely to the fact that there is actually a resource shortage. I mean, KGC has been speaking about the perfect storm coming within administration for a number of years. It came up in a couple of questions that we asked administrators in the KGC pensions admin fee and services survey that we publish. It's now gone to biannually, and that the industry was really worried that basically because there was so much happening, so many projects coming through, and changes to the working practices and people retiring from the industry through COVID and the pandemic, that they were facing resource shortages. We have projects such as GMP rectification hasn't been finished still. GMPE is being kicked off in earnest. We've got McLeod for the public sector. So the public sector is taking resources that were traditionally used in the private sector. We have normal projects such as buyouts, and we have administration moving. Things are just rather manic in the industry at the moment. So this resource shortage is really causing everybody issues. I mean, you can't open LinkedIn without seeing an EBC or a TPA advertising admin roles and the supporting roles that are needed by administration. So it is quite serious. But one of the things it's done is it has opened up opportunities for administrators to move on and get promoted and see a career path for themselves. And one of the things that we have been seeing recently is the increasing use of apprenticeships. Yes, apprenticeships have been around a lot, but sometimes it's been for the more glamorous actuarial investment consultancy type roles. So it's really good to see organizations promoting administration apprenticeships at school leaver level, at university level, but also from normal I mean, normal, i.e. non-pensions people, you know, out there working, people who might have an admin background, people who might have a customer care background, bringing those people into our industry. And one of the things I've seen, particularly research and providers, and also in recent award submissions, is the emphasis that administration providers are putting on developing their administrators, supporting them through with much more learning and development in an attempt to keep them, because recruiting people is definitely a more expensive mode. So these are the factors that are changing administration. And I think we now have to touch on the rise of technology. Now, obviously, I had to have a reference to Terminator. Terminator Judgment Day is the best Terminator ever film of all the franchise, and I'm brooking no discussion on that one. And I had to reference the Terminator because of the AI and robotics that we are seeing in the industry. But then again, we'll come on to that in a moment. So believe it or not, this is a simplistic example, and it's just an example of a DC, and I chose DC because it's a bit more exciting than a DB admin system and all the different connections. So in the center, you can see the member database with all the member records. And then around it, you've got workflow, EDM, barcode recognition, number recognition. You've got a payment system to do the lump sums. You've got your trustee report and accounting, reporting tools, your data audit, your compliance reporting tools down here. And then at the top, we've got where people like to have call centers, call center technologies, and call center technology is becoming increasingly integrated into the admin platform. So a call center person will use the technology to enter the workflow and workflow systems and the whole admin systems. You may also find administrators who don't have a call center capability may also use the call center technology or may go straight into the platform. And then you have the sort of web front end stroke mobile applications. And this sort of web front end is used in multiple facets. So you have the member, and the member can use it to see their records, see their contributions, do some modeling, do some switching, update expression of wish. Members have watched some webinars, financial education tools. And then you have the employer, and the employer access is more pushing information into the admin platform, contributions, HR data, you know, joiners, leavers, change of address, that type of thing. And you have the trustee access. Now, the trustee access is much more from a compliance point of view, so they can look at it from the workflow, SLA reporting. They can see a member's work going through a process. They can also, members look to see how many, the age profile of people. They can look at to see where things are invested. Basically, there's an awful lot they can do. But the web front end is also used for things like AE, middleware connecting in, your annuity broker connection, your transfer hub, whether you're using sort of something like an Origo, and then going out obviously to annuity providers and other schemes. On the other side, you've got your straight through processing to investment platforms. You've also got links into trustee bank accounts. Now, this is a simplistic version, and obviously it's a layman's version, and to me it looks complicated enough, but it's going to get more complicated when we have the dashboard ecosystem layered on top of it. But hey ho, it's going to be good fun. And also we're looking forward to open pensions like we've got open banking, so that's going to be even more fun for everybody.
Lesley, we've got a question from Richard Smith in the chat.
Oh, God.
Richard, I know a question. It's outrageous, isn't it?
How dare you, Richard?
Richard, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to just ask it? If you could unmute, maybe. Okay, I'll ask the question. Oh, he's traveling. Okay, what proportion of trustee boards does Lesley feel understand the complexity of this sort of diagram? That's the previous diagram.
Oh, God. About 10%.
10%. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for that one. Please don't crash. There's enough of that today. Oh, right. So, why is technology not adopted as much as it should be? Because we've seen open banking, and we need open pensions, really, given how many pensions people have got and the whole complexity of retirement savings. You know, we do know that people are administrators are starting to use AI, machine learning, particularly for low grade, and I'm calling it low grade, bulk post-processing. I mean, one example is one of the administration companies is using it particularly for database processing, and they are using it for GMP dashboard and de-risking exercises where the AI is doing a data cleanse, or at least a first cut of data cleanse, and they found for some of the data items they can get an 85% match, and it's reducing the time to do something from 15 minutes to 15 seconds. So it's quite a good, effective, efficient use of AI. I mean, it searches the database for the data, it validates the data, and it can do this through searching multiple files and also records at the same time. But why is it that we don't adopt technology quite like other industries? I think we have to remember the complexity and maturity, particularly of DB schemes. You know, I always remember being on the other side of the fence, a 22,000 live DB scheme, 6 sections, 22 benefit structures, a bit of local government thrown in, and hey presto, it's so complicated, and some of the sections have hardly any members. It wouldn't be economic at that time to automate the calculations. So without automation, you can't use the technology. Data, it's still not there. I mean, trustees must get so fed up of administrators going, we need to clean the data for GMP rectification. Thank you. We need to clean the data for GMPE. Thank you. Done. And now we've got dashboard. And even after these data cleanses, it's not good enough for dashboard. So administrators come cap in hand and say, we need to clean the data. We need more money. Size always matters, despite what you try to tell me. And there is I suppose one of the problems of the size is there's a lack of cohesive standardization. If we had everybody on the same benefit structures, then we could have standards. I mean, it'd be so easy if we took a PLSA's recommendation that going forward, everybody is on the same benefit structure for DB. It would make things so much easier. We don't have standardization in one part of the industry. We're getting a lot better at being standardized in terms of DC, in the way we exchange data, things like PASA. Got to push PASA because I think Kim's on, and their data standards are really helping. So hopefully we can get the standardization without getting the size. Investment required, and I think there's been an awful lot of short-sightedness by providers and trustees in this area, but part of it does come down to the low margins in administration, and I think people haven't paid enough for administration. When I first joined KGC 10 years ago, the KGC surveys were annually, and the first few years we saw the fees going down, and now it's bounced back up. But if you don't value something, then you won't pay for it. An administrator will an administration company will go to a trustee and ask for sign off on a project that costs a couple of grand, and they have to fight tooth and nail for it. An actuary or an investment consultant can go to a scheme and say, oh, it's going to cost you 15,000, and they don't blink an eye. Well, they don't like the pain, but they're more accepting of it. So it really is quite hard, and it's a double-edged thing. And investment is required, and it's needed. And I think this short-sightedness is demonstrated by a few years ago. KGC worked with Origo in helping them understand the TPA market rather than just the contract-based market. And they spoke to EBCs. And one of the excuses they used for not adopting the transfer service was the fact that the trustees wouldn't like it, because trustees wouldn't like doing away with the discharge form and signing up to the common declaration form. To me, that just sounded like an excuse not to invest in a technology that would actually save them time, save them money, and reduce risk to the members. But then again, on the other hand, you can understand where there's been a lot of merger and acquisitions, and you have EBC's TPAs with legacy systems. And one provider estimated it would take them 100 years of man days to transition from their legacy system to their platform. Luckily, after a little bit of hard thinking, they found a way to do it much more effectively and much more efficiently, and they've just about done it now. So there is a bit of, I can understand it on one hand, and on the other hand, I can't. I also think that COVID and the pandemic has helped trustees see the light where technology is concerned, because they had to have their meetings virtually, but also it did away with something so simple, a major bugbear, which was the wet signature. I mean, we even have that still with some investment managers needing a wet signature. I mean, come on, please, it's 2023. So I'm going to try and I'm going to actually hand over to you guys, and this is where we actually are going to test technology and see if there's any barriers to using Teams technology. What do you think? What do you think is the biggest barrier to technology? Okay, Steve, over to you.
I'm going to try and run polls. So here we go. This is my first attempt at running polls. So here we go. I'm launching a live poll, and it should be in the chat, I think. Is that right, Andre?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, there we go. So if you've seen the question in the poll, please submit your thoughts, and then we can have a look at the results very shortly. So which of these do you feel is the biggest barrier to technology?
It's quite interesting so far.
Right, there we go. And here comes the results. It's the results, live results. Look at this. Okay, 31 responses. That's very kind of you. Thank you very, very much. Lesley, over to you on what do you think about that? So
I'm quite surprised. I actually thought that data would be the highest. I can't see what, bear with me. Yeah, benefit structure. So we've got investment required, then the benefit structure, then data, then short-sightedness. Wow. Gosh, I'm really shocked that it was the investment required. I thought it would be data.
The beauty of polls.
I think we're going to have to investigate that a bit further at some stage. I think maybe we should get one of the technology companies on and ask them about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Could be a good follow-up. Absolutely.
I think so, because I do wonder if it's a little bit of a misconception about the actual investment required. If people actually if EBCs actually opened up to their clients about what they're doing and how much it's costing. Because if you speak to EBCs, and if you're judging the technology awards, which I'm not, but I have seen in the past, one of the first things that EBCs say is we're investing 1.5 million, we're investing 10% of our revenue and this type of thing. But I think it's incumbent on EBCs to work with trustees to understand why this investment is needed and what they will get back from it.
Well, if there's anybody who is part of the 31%, does anybody want to unmute and give their opinion as to why they felt investment required was their selection? Does anybody want to make an observation? Oh, stunned silence. Actually, Lesley, I'm going to decloak now and say I was one of the people that said investment required.
Yeah, go on.
So
then.
I'll tell you why. I think if
And
you're
also,
a third, yeah, sorry, go on. Yep.
I was also, having owned HS admin.
Well, indeed, this is true. As an administrator, I think you have a constant battle to control cost. You have a constant battle to innovate and give trustees and schemes better quality systems. But there's ultimately always that sort of ceiling of cost. So I think I wouldn't say it's you know, too onerous, but there will be a cost benefit analysis undertaken by the board to say, well, this piece of tech is fantastic, but it's going to cost us, say, I don't know, 100 grand or whatever it is. But the upside for the administrator might be 20 grand. Or there may be no upside. It may just be purely off the P&L. So there's probably some reticence of TPAs to invest in some of the technology rather than embrace it blindly, I guess. And I'm a believer in tech. As most of you know, I'm involved with Pension Playpen, I'm involved with Guide, I'm involved with Pension Lab. I believe in technology, but if you're running a TPA or even if you're an insurance company, its return on investment is really important. And some of the tech can be done really easily, and some of it can be really expensive and a big project. So that's my opinion, Lesley.
I also think you've focused on cost. And I've mentioned the low margins of admin, and some EBCs sort of run admin basically because they want the full service, not necessarily because they want the admin, which is a shame. But I've also touched on fees, and fees have not been high enough and have not recognised that admin is a profession and is worthy of respect in the same way as actuarial investment consulting is. Shall we move on to something more positive?
One thing that Barry Mack was trying to
Oh,
unmute, but he says he wonders whether the investment required is based on the issues of data and the complexity of benefits, which is a good question, I guess. So.
Yes, I suppose because some of the investment is needed to sort out the issues with data, and some of the investment is needed to do something about the old benefit structures. But I think I mentioned, that large scheme, when it was implemented, no one would have automated all the calculations. Whereas now, a lot of the EBCs, TPAs, when they're taking on schemes, are much more for automating virtually everything because of their need to use technology. So, for example, transfer calculations, early retirement, a lot of those wouldn't have necessarily been automated. We still see, for some unknown reason, transfer calculations going off to actuaries when they're perfectly can be done by administration systems if they're programmed. But because there's such a high demand for those quotations, people are investing in doing the automation of those. And that is something that I was going to cover in this innovation slides on the resource shortage, because I'm trying to be a little bit positive. But one of the things that we have, and I've mentioned the fact that we are losing, well, there's a big merry-go-round of administrators at the moment. People are actually being approached virtually every day, administrators being approached with they move to such and such. And we're seeing that the salary increase are for administrators. They're being offered 15 to 35k increases to move and the promise of promotion. In fact, one EBC I know has decided they won't take on contractors because a senior admin contractor was asking for £300 a day. I mean, that's getting up towards £80,000 for a senior administrator. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But what it means is in the past, administrators have thrown bums on seats at an issue rather than using technology to sort the issue out. So this resource shortage is a driver for innovation. But moving on to sort of other drivers of innovation, we've seen competition from overseas organisations coming into the UK. For example, we've got Bravera, PremVinNet, which I always get wrong. They're looking at taking on the UK providers because they've developed technology that works well overseas. They feel that they're much more advanced in automation. When we talk about dashboard, which we prefer not to at the moment, but thinking of dashboard, the UK went and looked elsewhere, and they looked at Norway, Sweden, Kiwi, and one of the ones that we don't hear too much about was the Israeli dashboard, where a pensions member could go online, they could compare the fees, they could compare the return on investments of different providers, and they could switch their pensions as a touch of the button. So we are learning from abroad. We touched on product development, and it comes really nicely alongside economies of scale because DC Master Trusts are getting that economies of scale. You know, they're really quite big now in terms of numbers as well as in assets under management. It is enabling them to look at areas that couldn't be done previously. You know, offering the through and two retirement options you can't get in single DC, much more sophisticated modelling, the financial educations. It's really exciting what is happening elsewhere. You know, they're setting up client forums, customer forums to test their product development. It's down to having the scale, the competition, and the technology at their fingertips. I think legislation, again, is a no-brainer. Dashboard says it all. Dashboard is opening up a new market in terms of ISP providers, more work for the administrators. So there's lots of innovation coming through there. And also, as I mentioned, EBCs using AI, machine learning to sort their data out. So there's some good things being driven by legislation. And also from last but not least is innovation that we pinch from other industries. So, for example, members can go online now and they can track their case. Your case is in checking. It will be available to you in 2 days' time. Also, if you are viewing, doing some retirement modelling online, little pop-up saying you may be interested in reading this. A bit like when I'm looking for a new dress, a little pop-up says, "Ooh, look at these handbags, look at these shoes that go really nicely with that dress. Oh, here's another dress. I'm a real sucker for that." So there are some plenty of positives coming through. So I don't want to be a total whinge bucket. And the benefits, I mean, a real no-brainer. They can reduce costs if used appropriately, if they're used to change things for the better rather than to replace what's done manually. And so that leads to greater efficiency. But what they're also enabling is is the use of technology, especially deep data analytics, to sort of hyper personalize the communication to members so they can target people, they can see trends. And I think being able to see trends, particularly in things like the cost of living crisis, is really important. So can you see the type of people that are opting out or reducing their contributions? Do they need a communication, a reminder of the importance of pensions? So it's really, really sophisticated what we can do with deep data dives. I suppose we have to meet customer expectations, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But one of those things about it's how we communicate, how we deal with members. And I think one of the things it's introducing is greater flexibility. I mean, we talked about this thing about flexible retirement. There is no such thing as cliff end retirement. I think Steve Webb has put, and research that LCP has done, is saying, well, no, people aren't retiring any more than they used to, but people are semi-retiring, and technology has hampered, or the lack of technology has hampered, the administration of flexible retirement. But I think with the developments in train, it is becoming, or it can become, the norm. Systems will be able to handle that going forward. So to finish off this, I suppose, this section, if you're still awake, you've got to think about what technology has delivered. I think what it has delivered and what it's going to deliver. I think it's going to deliver a joined up picture of retirement savings. That's the way we're going. All your financial products in one place. The dashboard is just the start. But I think we're going back to when they attempted to do the I suppose, the tax wrap platforms, where you can see your mortgage, your savings, your benefits, and all the tax implications in one place. I think that is where we're going. Finally, I think we'll end up with personal financial education with virtual financial advisors. And this will be all plumbed into, or the administration system will all be plumbed into this ecosystem. So I think what we have to think about is the art of the possible and what it can do for administration. Now we're going to use technology because how will technology affect the administrator? Will it replace them? So I'm afraid it's over to you again, Steve, and your wonderful poll technology.
Okay, let's let's see if we can launch the next poll.
And while you're getting ready, I just wanted to tell you a little story about, I was at a systems provider a few years ago, and chappie, he was a real techie geek. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a nerd, but he was saying basically we don't need workflow going forward because we'll have automation. Workflow will be irrelevant. Fine, I said. So what about administrators? Will we be getting rid of those too? And he turned around and said, yes, if I had my way. I know,
Wow.
shocking behavior. So will administrators just become button pushers?
Okay, if people can submit their answers, that would be good, and we can get the poll going. So. There we go. So initial results, 29 responses. Thank you very much, everybody. Lesley, what do you think? Yes and no is the answer.
I was expecting a yes and no, and the reason I was expecting a yes and no, it's already happening. I think when I probably mentioned when I was at the PMI and used to chair the education committee, one of the things that we were really concerned about is the loss of pensions technical knowledge, and that people weren't coming through to do the qualifications. And it's something I've seen, particularly in when I've audited in life companies when they're doing administration. They have no pensions knowledge. They know their processes and procedures. They can't look at something and think that's wrong. They just know that hasn't followed procedure A to B. Whereas still within the EBC, the trust-based world, they do have pensions knowledge and they have a broad depth of pensions knowledge. But I think we will go end up with button presses. But I also think that we will need the pensions technical people. So, people will still have a job. I don't know whether to be sad or not by that. I really don't. I can't make my mind up whether I'm sad or not by it. But there you go.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your submissions, but that's possibly the future of it. So
I mean, is it a bad thing? I'm not sure. Is it a good thing? Possibly. So I think it's time to go on to customers' behaviours and expectations, because these are also driving the change in administration. And that I want more says it all, doesn't it? That I want more generation that is coming along. An interesting statistic, 89% of UK people go online daily. And I was at a lovely dinner, Chatham House Rules. So no names, no pack drills. And we ended up talking about how many of us had all our pensions online. And I had to confess that of my 6 or 7, I don't have access to 2 of them. One of them, because it's DB, I know what I'm going to get, and I've basically been too lazy, and I'm just quite happy to get my annual statement, despite Paul Sturgis nagging me every time I see him. He's saying, have you gone online, Lesley? I was like, no. So it's not that the capability isn't there, it's just apathy. I'm an example of member apathy. And the other one, I don't have access to it, and it's really irritating because I have another policy with the same organisation, and I can access that. I have it on my phone. I look up, I wouldn't say daily, but I've been watching how the market's affected it recently. And the other one I can't. And the reason I can't is it is on a different platform because it was part of a merger and acquisition. But I think looking at these enough of my whinging, because I could whinge quite a bit about not being able to see that, because it's going to make all the difference. Virtually, I think we can say everybody in the UK, virtually, that is, because there's 1.5 million that don't, have access to the internet through some form of device. So that's a lot of people. Online banking statistics also show over the years an interesting rise in the number of people who use internet banking. I mean, goodness sake, 52% of oldies like myself use online banking. I have online banking for all my bank accounts. That makes me look as if I've got loads of money. I haven't. It's just I spread it about a bit. And I think COVID has also seen the change in online usage. I mean, for example, we all moved to internet shopping and getting our Tesco, Sainsbury's, Ocado, Morrison's delivery. So there's been a huge increase of retail shopping online. Just look at the high streets, there's hardly any shops left, but also video calls. Video usage increased by 30% in the first year of COVID, which is quite a lot. In fact, if I see people in real life now, I don't know how to talk to them. And one of the things about going back to the banking statistics, I've just remembered the point I wanted to make was, I think in the olden days when DC was new and fresh, one of the things we used to, I suppose, try and explain DC away, and it was money purchase back in those days. We used to say it was like a banking, it was like a bank account, savings account. You put money in, you see in your statements the line of your contributions going in, and then you see the growth and the total amount. So people can sometimes, you know, it's not a step too far if people think, oh, I can see my bank accounts and everything online. Why can't I see my pensions online? So there is that expectation. But I don't really want to stress this too much. And because it's not just, or oversimplify, because it's not just about youngsters, it's about mature people. We expect technology now to give us the answer. We expect instant responses, and we expect to be able to go online and find it for ourselves. I mean, perish the thought we actually have to pick up the phone and speak to people. And we notice youngsters, they can sit in the room and message each other rather than talk to them. Irritates me like nobody's business, but that's me whinging again. So how we are helped, how we are educated, we expect it to be delivered in a manner that we like and suits us rather than suits the provider. And administrators are expected to adapt to this brave new world. Can I just have one final poll, because I know we're running out of time, because I didn't touch, I missed it out accidentally, but we have the digitally disengaged, and there's 1.5 million people, and the regulator et al. Says we mustn't forget them. So what will happen to the digitally disengaged? Will people ignore them? Will we pander to them, or will, you know, the percentage become so long? Actually, Steve, why don't we just ignore that poll and move on? Because we've got 3 minutes. Are you
No,
okay
that's
with
fine.
that?
I'm sure you could run over a couple of minutes. I'm gonna leave the poll. Everybody can vote. We can overrun by a couple of minutes, Lesley. It's fine. So be interesting to see what people's opinions are. Do you not agree?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So there's
Let's
the
go
next
for it.
poll. So time will see disappear, and everyone will use tech. There will always be a percentage not engaged, a mix of the above. Okay, so if you could submit your responses, that would be great. Okay, so 23 responses. Thanks for those. And it looks like the winner is a mix, which is, you know, probably what you'd expect, Lesley, maybe.
Yeah, I think then we've all got a conscience. And when I suppose I'm talking about digitally disengaged, I'm not talking about those with special needs, because the industry is doing an awful lot for them already. You know, the RNAB has a called Surf Right, has a guide how to communicate with them. So what can't be done online, you know, there's administrators using Braille. There's lots of different tools on the webs now that administrators are actually using. So yeah, not surprised. We can't, then it's not at a stage we have to pander to those. So finally, I think the future for administration is bright. We still need them. They are, because of the shortage of them, they are getting more credit finally for being all things to all people in some ways, and being much more than record keepers. Technology is a wonderful tool, but it won't replace them. And hopefully with good technology, good administrators, we will meet customers' expectations, the savers' expectations, the members' expectations. I wish I could come up with a name for them that everybody will agree with, but God help us when dashboard is finally delivered. And I'm just leaving you with a quote. The first rule of any technology used in business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So that's sort of the end. And if you've enjoyed this presentation, I'm Lesley Carline. If you haven't, I'm Kim Goobler.
Thank you, Lesley. That's fantastic. Before we wind up, does anybody have any questions? Kim, I know you put a point in the chat. Do you want to unmute and just raise your point with Lesley on that particular subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lesley raised it in terms of the legacy systems that we have at a number of the TPAs and the resource constraints that we have in terms of the pension technical expertise. But I think to really leverage the most out of technology and meet customer expectations, we actually need to leverage other skills. So proper, data scientists, behavior scientists, people who look at user experience to complement the pension expert expertise, because pension technical experts are not UX specialists, data scientists, or behavioral scientists. So I think we can get the best out of administrators if we assist them with those additional skills, is a point I can't make.
I'm not going to disagree, and we're already seeing that, particularly in the larger master trusts. But the EBCs are definitely getting their data, taking on data scientist skill sets, and I'm just waiting to see it in action, because in some respect there's been a lot of talk about it and what they can do with it. But again, sometimes they're just so busy that these big ideas don't always come to fruition, but the will is there, and people, we just need people. We need more people at the moment. I think that the TPAs and EBCs are kicking themselves because they stopped growing their own and started just pinching from each other. But now they're back reinvesting in administrators and in those other skill sets that are needed to support administration.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil Casson, I don't know if you want to unmute Phil and just make your point.
Sure. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I was just interested in your view, Lesley, or whether admin is still kind of good business for TPAs, or is it really just a bit of a burden and they can feel they've got to do it?
It's really interesting, because when the KGC survey started, well, it's about 12 years ago now, there was 18 TPAs. It went up to 22, and it's now going down to about 17 that we include. And we were saying a couple of years ago there was only 4 originally left, who hadn't merged or acquired anyone. And I think we're down to 2. And if you think of standalone administrators, I think there's only 2 left, and they are both owned by pension schemes. So you've got Railpen owned by RPS, and you've got Trafalgar House owned by Trafalgar House, who, whatever it's called now, I can't remember, the shipping people that were. So it's quite interesting. Over the last few years, a lot of the mid-tier EBCs have decided on doing standalone admin, whereas previously they weren't interested in standalone admin. And to me, that reflects the desire to, they've invested in their technology and investing in their technology, and they believe that they can do the administration and make money on it. Some of the larger EBCs are still struggling with their infrastructure, shall we say, and to them, admin is just something that they have to do to get the actuarial, investment consultancy, fiduciary management to do the full service. There's a lot of money to be made on projects, particularly, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, oh, well, we might be in buyout in 5 years' time. Who would want us? Because we want to move. And it's, well, yes, they will want you, because they want all that project work to get you ready for buyout, and also helping with the actual transition into buyout.
Yeah, fair comment, Lesley.
Yeah,
Philip, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does, and it's an interesting kind of reflection, really, and it probably, in a way, the more you start to see that are truly interested in the business, that's where you start to see innovation. Because if you're not interested in it, you're just going to, it's a burden. We're just doing it simply because we can get, we want the other businesses that you mentioned.
We have been concerned when it's when an organisation has decided they don't want to do admin only and they've got full service. You do think, well, are they going to innovate in the admin? And they promised us they will, and we have seen it, but that tends to be off the back of some of their, particularly in DC, of their investment consulting, because they need the information out of the system to be able to do the investment consulting, because they're doing some really clever stuff on member profiling to be able to come up with the investment. But that's sort of, cause and effect, isn't it? In a good way.
Absolutely. We have a request about the slides. Are you happy for the slides to be sent out, Lesley, or?
Yes, I'm happy. I'll give you the updated version with the last slide on.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Brilliant.
Just in case anybody wants to contact me directly.
Yeah, okay, that'd be fine. Thank you very much. So yeah, really appreciate your time today, Lesley. That was a fantastic presentation. Lots of good feedback from people. So really enjoyed that. And yeah, so it's a big area to consider. The development of technology and the development of admin and engaging with members more. That's what it's all about, isn't it? So that's at the top of lots of people's list, I think. So really appreciate your input. Fantastic event, and yeah, Lesley, that's brilliant. So great. Yeah,
I can
brilliant.
go get my car sorted now.
You can go and go fix your car. I'm sorry I told everybody you had a crash this morning, but hey ho, you did very well. Bearing in mind you had a crash this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll put the video up on Playpen later today. Next week we've got William McGrath from C-Suite talking about DB liabilities and looking at longevity swaps. Quite an interesting part of the market where I think he's going to be attacking some of the strategies taken on in the last 10 years, which may have worked and may have not, and in fact some schemes have lost millions of pounds. So yep, we'll do that next week. And thanks everybody for your input and your time. If you haven't joined Playpen, please do, and if you like Playpen, please share with friends on the invite friends tab. And as usual, we pray for peace in the East. And I cannot believe it's now the 28th of February, over a year, that I've been saying every week we pray for peace in the East. So thanks everyone for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again, Lesley. Great session. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So thanks very much. Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.